Mr. Matthews, if you would please stand with your counsel for the reading of the verdicts.
A Denver cardiologist, called one of the most prolific serial rapists in Colorado history, sobbed in court as a judge read his guilty verdict. He was convicted of dozens of sexual assault charges, all connected back to a scheme to target women on dating apps. We're analyzing the case and further legal action with the man representing his victims. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We first told you about Denver, Colorado cardiologist Stephen Matthews last year when he was arrested on multiple charges of sexual assault. The first accuser to go public with her story told local media that she'd met Matthews through a dating app, but says she doesn't remember much of the actual date because she blacked out. And once the first victim came forward, tips started pouring into police. More women accused Matthews of drugging and possibly assaulting them. The women's stories were all very similar. He would connect with them on a dating app like Hinge or Tinder, and then they'd meet up for something like brunch or a dog walk. They said the dates would be conveniently located near his home so he could invite them back for a drink, and the victims say those drinks were drugged. Now, most of the victims had memory loss, or they ended up back in their own home without any idea of how they got there. In fact, one of the women says when she refused to see him again, he sent her photos of her naked in a hot tub. Matthews eventually faced more than 36 counts, accused of drugging 11 women and sexually assaulting 9 of them. Some of the assaults dated all the way back to 2019. So after weeks of trial, the jury handed down its verdict.
Jury verdict, count 1. It is Roman numeral 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen Matthews, guilty of, choose only one. It is sexual assault incapable of appraising nature of conduct. Answer the interrogatory. We further find, did the defendant cause submission through substantial impairment? Signature or checkbox is yes.
And it went on like this through dozens and dozens of counts as Matthews started to break down. You could see him hunch over several times and start crying.
Jury verdict, count 5. Sexual assault incapable of appraising nature of conduct. It is Roman numeral 2. We, the jury, find the defendant, Stephen Matthews, guilty of sexual assault incapable of appraising nature of conduct. Signature by the foreperson. Did the defendant cause submission through substantial impairment? It is yes. Signature by the foreperson.
Matthews shakes his head, appears to be in complete disbelief, which is, kind of surprising given all the evidence the prosecution had. They called almost 60 witnesses. There was around 500 pieces of evidence in this trial, including videos and photos he'd taken of his victims. Matthews was convicted on 35 of the 38 counts of sexual assault and assault, except for 3 sexual assault charges that were related to one particular victim. He was found guilty of a lesser charge of third-degree assault of that victim, too. It takes the judge more than 10 minutes to read the list of absolutely heinous counts that Matthews was convicted of. All of them are felonies. And when the judge told everyone they could be seated, Matthews put his head down on the table in his hands and appeared to sob. The defense has noted that there was no physical evidence of drugging, that there was no drugs found inside Matthews' home, that other than Plan B and contraceptives, there was nothing there. They also pointed out that most of the women never had sexual assault exams done, so how do we know what really happened? The 36-year-old has been locked up since his arrest in March of 2023, currently being held behind bars on a $5 million bond. He's going to be sentenced at a hearing in October, and it's our understanding he could be sentenced to 25 years in prison. Now, the women will be allowed to give victim impact statements if they want to, and Matthews, of course, will have an opportunity to speak as well, so it'll be very interesting to see what happens from that. Now, after the verdict came down, the former district attorney in Denver called Matthews, quote, one of the most prolific serial rapists in the history of the state of Colorado. Matthews had previously agreed with the Colorado Medical Board to suspend his medical license as his case made its way through the criminal process. Looks like he won't be getting that back. The current Denver DA, Beth McCann, released a statement saying, quote, Stephen Matthews took advantage of nearly a dozen women in the most egregious way imaginable, and for that, he will now pay a significant price. I hope today's verdict provides a measure of comfort to all the victims, whose courage throughout this case should be an inspiration to us all. By the way, talking about a civil lawsuit, did you know that our sponsor of this episode, Morgan & Morgan, is the largest injury law firm in the country? Yeah, they have over 1,000 attorneys. Their clients get a dedicated team of case specialists, investigators, paralegals. The whole process from starting a claim and uploading documents to talking to your legal team, all can be done from your smartphone. With Morgan & Morgan, you not only have a firm that has secured verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions, but with them, there's no upfront fee. You only pay them if you win. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. All right, so now I want to bring in Stephen Burg. This is the attorney for Matthews victims, representing them in a civil action. Stephen, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
So you know what I'm going to ask you? Your reaction to the monumental verdict.
I think for people who knew this case, the ins and outs, there really was no surprise here. It's nice to see that the criminal case justice was served as much as it can be in that case, and that the jury certainly got it right.
What was your reaction to Matthew's reaction during the reading of the verdict?
It just kind of looked like crocodile tears. And I think the people who've seen his conduct and know the totality of it, it seemed more manipulation and more acting.
You and I talked before you came on here that you had been following the case. What did you think was the most significant pieces of evidence that were presented to this jury?
I think just the sheer volume of witnesses that were testifying to the same circumstances and facts. And they made these reports early on, and they made them without any ability to really coordinate any of the testimony.
Were you surprised that the jury came back and found him not guilty on 3 charges?
Well, I think it actually gives the jury's verdict a little bit more credibility in terms of keeping it, not allowing a potential of appeal, because it really shows the jury went through, they took their job serious, and they measured the facts against the evidence. And while they didn't find, the 3 charges, they found the same. They found him guilty with the same lesser degree charges on that victim.
Right. So in other words, they didn't find him guilty of the sexual assault charges, but they did find him guilty of a lesser charge of assault with respect to that victim. Yeah, I agree with you. Sometimes if you have a lot of charges, the jury comes back and finds the defendant guilty across the board and comes back within 30 minutes. Obviously, the circumstances of the case can be different, but that could be an argument that could be raised. Yeah, they just were quick to rush. They compounded everything together. They didn't carefully assess the evidence here. That would seem to be a very difficult argument to make. Was it tough for your clients during this trial?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a very, very difficult, emotional thing. Really inspirational that they had so much strength and courage to come forward, to go through it. And, some of the feedback that we've gotten has been that it was therapeutic, it was helpful, and it's a show of strength to be able to tell your story and to potentially give others freedom to tell their story as well.
Did they testify?
Some of them did testify in this case, yes.
And was that tough for them, particularly under, I imagine, cross-examination by Matthew's attorneys?
It was tough, but the truth is the truth. And, the difficulty of sharing embarrassing moments, horrible, horrible moments where they've blamed themselves at times. And so, yeah, I mean, sharing their most intimate moments with essentially the world was very, very difficult.
I want to talk about the civil action, the case that you have against Matthews. What are the claims? What are you alleging in these in this action?
So there's a couple potential claims that can be brought. There's a negligence claim. There's a potential for a Premise Liability Act. There's a potential product liability claim, and they all really stem around the failure of Hinge and Tinder, which are owned by Match Group, that when he was reported as a sexual assaulter, as a rapist, and they said he was going to be taken down, and then he remained on their site being promoted by them for years.
And have they responded to this lawsuit?
So the lawsuit hasn't been filed yet.
Okay.
And
have they given any indication about how they will respond to this?
Look, it's standard playbook on this that they're going to say they didn't have a duty to act. They're going to say under the Communications Decency Act, they may have liability there. We don't think any of that has any validity here. There were repeated reports of him being a rapist. They said they were going to remove him, and they didn't, period.
But if they have that kind of immunity in a way, how do you pierce that?
Well, we don't think it applies for cases like this. And so that's certainly their argument that they're going to try to make, but it really has no basis here. They took affirmative action in regards to Matthews. They promoted him. They responded to him being reported as a rapist and said that they would remove him. Ultimately, they didn't. And so they failed to do what they promised they would do.
Have you seen any other cases where this has been successful? You go after social media companies, you go after dating app companies, where someone is a victim of sexual assault or assault in general, that platform was used as a conduit for people to communicate and meet up?
Yeah, I mean, it's factual dependent, right? It's whether they were just a platform or whether they took any actions. And here they clearly took actions, and this is going to fall outside of Section 230.
And what are you hoping for in terms of damages?
Well, I think maybe I should update you since last time I was on here. Last October we talked. Since then, we went and shared some of the stories of what was going on with the Colorado Coalition Against Sexual Assault, CCASA. They helped champion a bill in Colorado. It was the Online Facilitated Misconduct and Remote Tracking Bill. Basically, it mandates that companies like Match Group, they adopt a safety policy that they have to do, and then they have to report to the Attorney General's office when they remove users for safety. And so that was a big fight. That was introduced January 10th of 2024. It passed April 30th of 2024, and then signed by the governor June 5th of 2024, and is effective August 7th of 2024. So since this story came out, since our survivors told their story, there has been a bit of change in the law that helps protect women and people who have been raped and harmed on online dating platforms. Match Group had 3 separate lobbyists, lobby groups that were involved in that, and I know they were fighting this bill very hard. So it passed. It was significant improvement, but we still have a lot more work to do because something like this should have never happened in the first place. And so we want to make sure that there's not an opportunity for something like this to happen again.
But just to be clear, the law that passed, would that apply retroactively to his communications back in the day?
No, it's not going to apply retroactively. It's going to give a little more guidelines. It's not everything we wanted in the bill. It's the first bill in the country like this to require a safety policy and reporting to the Attorney General's office. I think we still have a lot of progress to go till we get to the point where a bill like this can prevent the Stephen Matthews repeated serial rapist situation.
And do you look at any other individuals or companies as potentially responsible for how he was able to continue on doing this for so many years?
As far as the information I have, I know that Tinder and Hinge and the Match Group, it was reported to them that he was a rapist, and he continued to be on there for years afterwards. I don't have other information about other potential companies or anything else at this time.
Do your clients plan to speak at his sentencing?
Some do, some don't. It's just individual dependent. And, I'm supportive of whatever each individual wants to do.
And just to go back, what are you anticipating? What are you looking for in terms of damages from these companies should your lawsuit be successful and a jury or judge sides with your argument?
Yeah, look, if businesses make decisions based on profitability, then one of the factors we want them to factor in is safety and doing the right thing. And so we want to make sure that the calculus changes moving forward, that a verdict is so big that a company says, you know what, we better take safety seriously. this person's been reported as a rapist. You know what? Let's remove him and move on.
Stephen Burg, thank you for coming back on. Thank you for the update. Very big verdict in this case, and clearly it will have an effect moving forward. Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate the time.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.